The dire wolf brought back to life. My name is Bill. Welcome to the Night Terrors Weekend Show, and we're starting right now. Welcome to Elder Grown in Takahama Plateau. To access our Discord, just click on the link in the description below. Taco says hi to all. This is our show schedule. The Banned by YouTube video series drops a new episode every Wednesday morning. Every topic you see on this show was banned by YouTube, so don't miss it. And Wednesday night is movie night when we gather for a terrifying double feature, only on Twitch and hosted by Gotchaman. Elder says showtime. Coming up this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, The Wicker Man, from Anthony Schaefer, the writer of Frenzy, the writer of Sleuth, comes this incredible occult thriller in which a Puritan police sergeant searches an island for a missing girl, while the pagan locals claim she is unknown to them. Thank you for the suggestion, T Plateau. Copying now. Thank you, Taco. And got it on the list. Top of the list. Followed by Monster in a Box. This is the story of Spalding Gray and his attempt to dominate the monster in a box. It is his first-person account about dealing with success while striving to be successful again. Welcome to Green Tea and David Bryce. Jeffrey Thomas says, hey, Bill. He says, gonna buy me a dire wolf. David Bryce is on a watch streak. Congratulations, David. David says, good evening. Night Terrors depend solely on viewer support. If you like the show, please consider supporting us. In the description below, you will find different ways to contribute, and even if you can only buy me a coffee, I thank you for your support of the show. Kanga Kong asks, what's today's topic? Today's topic is the dire wolves that were brought back from extinction after 13,000 years by Colossal Biosciences. David Bryce with a suggestion. Thank you, David. All right, let's get started, shall we? Green Tea with a watch streak. Thank you, Green Tea. Here at RollingStone.com, Frogfan says, hey, Bill, looking forward to sleep paralysis after the terrifying show this evening. I will be praying for you, Frogfan. Thank you, sir. Here at RollingStone.com is a story by Andrea Marks entitled 12,000 Years Later, Dire Wolves Are Back. Verpine is here. Good topic, Verpine. Thank you, V. Got it. That's two I got to set to the side. First David Bryce's and then Verpine's. Thank you, Verpine. And Ms. Marks begins. Oh, what do we got to do here? Blah, 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 blah. Can we just X out of this? I hope. Good. Ms. Marks begins. From certain angles, the white canids on the video call, I think she means the dire wolves, chewing on branches in the grass, look like Samoyeds. Huge, white, fluffy faces and big black noses. Kenga says, I did hear about that in passing. Sounds like a great topic. Thank you, Kenga Kong. Just when you start considering what it might feel like to wrap your arms around them and bury your face in the 5-inch deep fur. Around their necks, they lower their gaze, and you can see just how long and pointed is their snout. So much the better to follow Ice Age scent trails. And how big are their golden eyes, set low and forward on the front of their head, partway down the slant of their nose. So much the better for these carnivorous hunters to target their prehistoric prey. Now they got to bring back the prey. Just then, a sound off camera startles the pups, and they bolt toward the tree line, scattering like deer across a meadow. If deer had broader shoulders, long fluffy tails, and paws the diameter of softballs and still growing. They quickly settle down. Lost my place. They quickly settle down to continue gnawing on sticks. T. Plateau says if they can bring back the direwolf, just think that they may be able to bring back the thylacine, which I know what that is. It's the something native to Australia and or New Zealand. I can't remember the name of it, the common name. Thank you, Elder, for all your due attention to those problems. I appreciate it, sir. Tasmanian tiger. Thank you, T. Plateau. Thank you, Elder. They quickly settle down to continue gnawing on sticks. But the reminder of their power and wildness lingers. They are not dogs. Actually, they are dogs. They just discovered that so-called dire wolves are not really wolves. They're, instead of, the split occurred before or after. The split occurred after wolves became dogs. So they're actually dogs. They're direwolf pups, back from extinction after some 12,000 years. If you thought direwolves were the stuff of Game of Thrones lore, you're not alone. It's an assumption George R. Martin himself repeatedly needs to correct. He tells the Rolling Stone, "You'd be surprised at how many people seem to think I invented the direwolf. Much as I would love to take credit for that, it's just not so. Direwolves were real, one of the apex predators of the Ice Age." End quote. The modern direwolves, Romulus and Remus, these are the ones that were brought back to life, born in October, plus a third, younger pup, Khaleesi, born in January, are the results of efforts by bioscience startup Colossal, which launched in 2021. You may know the company for recently producing headline-grabbing and objectively adorable woolly mice, as part of their cornerstone effort to bring back the woolly mammoth. The woolly mice having not tusks, but like long fur and something else. Big fur and something else. But Colossal's direwolf project has since outpaced the mammoth, thanks to an abundance of science, both genetic and reproductive, available about dogs compared to elephants. Rhino Rex has arrived. Rhino Rex says, seriously, they didn't name it Stark. Right, because the direwolves were the what would you call it, the Stark Standard? You may know the company for... I read that already. In fact, I read everything here. I thought that was cigarettes. It's alcohol. Very heavy alcohol. Colossal, co-founded by entrepreneur Ben Lamb and renowned geneticist George Church, aims to use CRISPR gene editing technology to not only bring back prehistoric creatures, but to save species threatened by extinction today. What to do with resurrected ancient species in the long run remains somewhat up in the air. But according to Lamb, who was also the CEO, their efforts are an important part of rescuing species everywhere from disappearing forever. Quote, Green Tea says, the mouse is kind of cute. I just hope it doesn't grow big. It'd be able to chew through anything. The woolly mouse. Quote, we're in the 6th mass extinction, and it is human-caused, he says, referring to periods of major species die-offs throughout geological time, the previous iterations of which scientists believe were caused by asteroids or volcanoes. Quote, while there's different perspectives around human-caused climate change, I think everyone understands that if we overfish the oceans, there's less fish. If we cut down the rainforest, there's less habitat for those animals. People are receptive to that, end quote. Direwolves thrived during the Pleistocene epoch. I think there's 2 different epochs, the Pleistocene and the Pliocene, but I'm not sure. Just when they roamed in packs across what would later become the Americas, standing between 3.4 and 3.8 feet tall, significantly taller than gray wolves, which are around 2.5 feet tall. They hunted bison and horses, and sometimes ground sloths, with prey varying depending on where they lived. Around 10,000 years BCE, they died out, likely due to a scarcity of food during a period of global warming. The first fossils were found in the 1850s in Indiana and Nebraska, and the species' original Latin name, Canis dirus, meant terrible wolf. Bringing it back is a groundbreaking move, and one whose consequences may not yet be understood. No kidding. There's Mr. Martin, and I'd say probably a regular wolf. George Martin with one of the dire wolf pups. The thumbnail for this episode, by the way, happens to be taken from the episode where Arya Stark reunites supposedly with was it Nymeria? The grown-up Nymeria. Nymeria being Arya's personal direwolf. I hear in the books they stayed pretty close, but not in the TV show. Arya and Nymeria. The orphan direwolves adopted by the Stark children in Game of Thrones were inspired by Martin's visit to the La Brea tar pits, where a glowing backlit wall showcases 400 direwolf skulls found at the site. Martin says, quote, they make for quite a display, and they certainly made an impression on me the first time I saw them. Martin is an investor in colossal biotechnic, or I think it's colossal bioscience. Quote, I have always loved wolves. There's something primal and powerful about them. That day in La Brea, the direwolf took hold of my imagination and never let go, end quote. The direwolf is a relatively new project for Colossal. The startup had been working in the past few years on 3 species. The mammoth, their marquee animal. Verpine says Game of Thrones budget's not big enough for lots of CGI direwolves. Good point, V. Welcome Big Daddy X84, who says hi Bill, hi all. The startup has been working the past few years on 3 species. The mammoth plus the dodo and the thylacine, a marsupial also known as the Tasmanian tiger. This says the Tamsanian tiger. It is Tasmanian. I'm not crazy. This says Tamsanian. I'm pretty sure it's Tasmanian tiger. Wasn't that... That's not the same as a Tasmanian devil, is it? Tasmanian for sure, says T-Plateau. T-Plateau, that's not the same as the Tasmanian devil, is it? Or are they the same thing? When their efforts attracted celebrity investors, including Tom Brady and Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson, devil and tiger are different. Thank you, Gotcha Man, and welcome to Gotcha Man. T-Plateau says, no, the devil is smaller and more ferocious. Not the same thing, confirms Elder. Thank you, Elder. The devil is just a little guy, he says. This generated a fresh supply of capital, and Colossal began searching for other species to add to their roster. Khaleesi at 1 month old. The company decided on the direwolf for two main reasons. Their ancient DNA was available, and they can safely be born using a surrogate. Also pulling in the direwolf's favor, Lamb adds, were the multiple tribal leaders who had spoken to him about the importance of wolves to their land and culture. I think he means First Peoples tribal leaders. That should have been clarified. Multiple tribal leaders. Verpine says the Tasmanian devil has a better press agent. Yes. Looney Tunes. Sometimes known as Looney Tunes. As for the decision to bring back a predator known to be 20% larger than a gray wolf, the largest living canine, Lamb says direwolves aren't anything for humans to feel nervous about, in a personal life and limb sense. Quote, it's those weird things where people are afraid of sharks, and that's just not really a good thing because sharks are good for the ecosystem, according to Lamb. As for the wolves threatening livestock or other species, Colossal has no plan to release the wolves truly back into the wild. Quote, our long-term goal is to put them back into expensive ecological preserves. Can anyone say Jurassic Park? But to do that in a way that's far away from humans, far away from cattle, far away from everything that there would be a conflict around, and probably on indigenous land because of the spiritual connection to them, says Lamb. Boy, there's about 300 problems I can think of. It better be an island like with Jurassic Park. Green tea with a topic. Thank you, Green Tea. Ooh, what a good topic. We have our, looks like we have our core topics at this time. Whoops, pasting it in the wrong place. Got to move it over here. You're number 4, Green Tea. Thank you much, ma'am. Look at all these advertisements for this hard alcohol. What is it? I must know. Open image in new tab, please. This is evidently Bardstow, Kentucky. Well, that ain't going very far very soon, is it? No, it ain't. Taco, thank you for the diamonds. Much appreciated, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. To build the direwolves, scientists at Colossal, led by Chief Science Officer Beth Shapiro, extracted DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old inner ear bone and fed it into a sequencing machine. Shapiro, an evolutionary biologist, describes this process as solving a trillion-piece puzzle, where only some of the pieces actually go into the puzzle. And the picture on top of the box is kind of similar to the puzzle, but not exactly the same. End quote. In other words, you're glad a machine is doing the work. Frogfan says they could release the dodo bird back into its natural habitat in Washington, D.C. Indeed, I think that's on their short list, the dodo. I believe it is. Thank you, Frogfan. 9 months of computational power later. Wow. I guess they were not using one of those quantum processors. They had a reconstructed genome that once made up the direwolf. Incredible. They have the whole freaking genome. Well, there you go. From there, Shapiro and her team compared it to that of the gray wolf, finding the places where their genome varied, giving direwolves their direwolfish attributes, such as light coloring, larger stature, and denser, longer coats. They wound up taking an alternative route to a light coat, because certain variations in the pigmentation gene have been linked to deafness and blindness in dogs. Quote, our primary goal is to make healthy animals, says Shapiro. They opted to edit a different gene for coat lightness. Quote, fortunately, we know a lot about coat color in gray wolves and could identify other genetic changes that are safe in gray wolves. Big Daddy X84 is here. Welcome, Big Daddy. They edited all variations into the gray wolf's genome and performed quality control checks to ensure the cells remained healthy as they grew. Just incredible. This is Romulus and Remus. At 3 months old. Incredible. They're going to be huge. Like 4.5 feet tall, something like that. Taller than some people. Here, Shapiro says, people should understand an important detail of the project. Frogfan says he believes that the dodos were mainly relegated to Congress. It is impossible for the DNA of these new cells to be 100% identical to their prehistoric ancestors. Well, there's also a lot of junk in the genome. Quote, there's probably millions of differences between gray wolves and dire wolves, and the DNA editing technology is not sufficiently robust that we can make all of these changes simultaneously without causing the cell to melt down. Until we can synthesize a whole genome from scratch, we can't, you don't want to do that. We can't make something that's 100% genetically identical. Neither do you want to. But it's also not necessary because what we're trying to do is create a functional equivalent of that species that used to be there. I think T. Plateau has a story about a bite from a Tasmanian devil. If I can grab it. Wait, here we go. I'm not finding it. It blew by. Sorry, T. Plateau. Oh, wait. Here we go. T. Plateau knows someone who got bit by a Tasmanian devil. And they had to have anti-rabies and all sorts of weird vaccines. The devils have facial tumors and other conditions. Wow. Green Tea says, in college I used to play poker after hours at a place that brewed their own alcohol. There would be a jug on the counter with a tablespoon. One tablespoon would burn all the way down, and more than 3 or 4 spoons would have folks stumbling. Now that's what I call a die-hard brewer. The implications of this are twofold. First, to paraphrase the biologist, haters are going to hate. Quote, my colleagues in the field of taxonomy are going to be like, it's not a direwolf. And that's fine, but to me, it looks like a direwolf and it acts like a direwolf. I'm going to call it a direwolf. Second, it means that extinction, even if only on a taxonomical technicality, still really is forever. People shouldn't get complacent about letting endangered species die off because we think we can just genetically engineer them back into existence. De-extinction is not a solution to the extinction crisis. De-extinction is now a term, I guess. And we never want to say that it is. According to Shapiro, extinction is forever. Instead, the idea is to welcome an animal that can thrive on Earth today, in a different environment with different resources than were available when they first walked the planet. The question remains as to whether they could ever make it on their own, and how they would actually impact ecosystems, outside the watchful eye of caretakers dedicated to maintaining the ideal conditions for their survival. The dire wolf pulled ahead of colossal's mammoth revival efforts for a key reason, according to the biologist. The scientific community has done lots more research on their relatives, wolves, than they have on the mammoth's relatives, elephants. It's a much easier space to work in, says Shapiro, both in terms of learning how the DNA edits that we might make affect the animal and regarding their reproductive biology. Yeah, it's 15-month gestation period for an elephant, I think, or thereabouts. More than a year. There's still a lot to learn about embryo transfer in an elephant, for example, she says. For dogs, it's no sweat. End quote. Identical twins, Romulus and Remus, arrived via scheduled C-section to their hound mix surrogate mothers on October 1st, 2024. On the wolves' 2,000-acre fenced-in preserve at a secret location in the United States, with tons of space and 4 seasons, producing the necessary median temperature and rainfall for the species to thrive. Rhino Rex says it's closer to 2 years for an elephant. I did not know that. Let's find out for sure. What is the gestation period for an elephant? What is the gestation period for an elephant? "22 months. Wow. Asian elephants, 18 to 22 months. 18 to 22. Baby elephant calves are usually born weighing between 200 and 250 pounds. Wow. African elephants are 22 months, elder, and the Asian are 18 to 22. Wow, no kidding. Did I read about the rainfall and the median temperature? I wasn't paying attention to it if I did. Tea Plateau, once again, promoting the Fremantle coffee. Well, because no one can get it. You'd have to be a smuggler to get some of that coffee, because Australia will not allow it to be shipped out of the country. So you have to visit. I think she wants company. Matt James, the chief animal officer at Colossal, still remembers the first time he heard the baby wolves howl. We actually have the howl here. Let's see if we can get that up here. We're going to take a listen to the howling of the dire wolves under fair use. It's at foxweather.com. And here goes. I can't hear anything. Oh, let's unmute it. Might be better if we unmute it. Let's try again. Incredible. I gotta hear that sound again. All right. Thank you, foxweather.com. What's the Allegory is here. Welcome to What's the Allegory, Morning Glory. Rhino Rex says, from hearing the whine, his dogs are losing it. He was one of 3 on the care team, staying on site and giving the pups around-the-clock feedings every 2 hours. So that's probably Matt James right there. That's probably Matt James right there. Or right. Where'd it go? Oh, I X'd out of it. Wow. The guy we just saw and can no longer see. One day when the wolves were 5 or 6 weeks old, another person working with the pups was singing to them, performing the wordless vocalizations that Ariel in The Little Mermaid sings when Ursula is stealing her voice. Suddenly, one of them triggered a howl, and then the other one started howling, and we all lost our minds, says James. We're sitting there in a vet clinic, exhausted from all these overnight feeds, and then suddenly howls. And you remember, holy S-word. That's the first F-word time in 12,000 years that this species has howled. Unfortunately, none of us will get to hear those howls in person anytime soon, because the wolves aren't accepting any visitors. Lem says he wants to keep the wolves safe from overzealous fans. Probably a good idea. Which Colossal began accruing after it debuted the woolly mice. Quote, we've had people showing up to our labs, he says. It's been nuts. So I just want to be very secure about the wolves, end quote. 2 layers of 9-foot fence keep the wolves in, and a series of cameras and drones monitor the wolves' location when they're roaming the full 2,000 acres, about 2.5 times the size of Central Park. There's a smaller 6-acre contained area where the wolves can be lured for feedings. Oh, excuse me. Sean Hatfield has arrived. Welcome, Sean. T. Plateau saw a YouTube of a baby crocodile with a stick in its mouth doing a death roll. So adorable. A death roll is when, I believe when, and this I just know from Crocodile Dundee. Or the Crocodile Dundee era, let me say that. Put it that way. Is where a crocodile clamps upon one of your body parts and then underwater rolls you over again and again. That's called a death roll. I wonder if there's an opposite move to get out of a death roll. One would hope so. Right now, the 5-month-old brothers, who already weigh more than 80 pounds, get 6 pounds of ground horse, deer, and beef, plus some dry kibble every day. While the plan is for them to graduate to consuming whole dead animals, they and Khaleesi will never hunt their own dinner. James says releasing live prey into the preserve would be cruel and unusual, since the pups have never been taught by other wolves how to finish a kill. It would be an ugly scene if they tried and failed. I'd say give them the chance. I don't know. I just say give them the chance. Breed and prey that doesn't feel pain. There you go. Martin is one of the few people who's gone to visit the wolves, and Lamb says Martin wept when he met them. Martin, George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones. Quote, I never imagined I would actually see a direwolf, says Martin. The day I met Romulus and Remus and cradled Romulus in my arms is a day I will remember for the rest of my life. That may have been a picture of him actually cradling Romulus. On HBO's Game of Thrones, Jon Snow, played by Kit Harington, is the only Stark child whose white direwolf matches the light-colored coat colossal scientists are convinced they really had. I think its name was Ghost. That a direwolf had been brought back to life is very emotional, says Harrington, who is an advisor to the startup. This is a science that can help prevent and undo some of the ills we have inflicted on the natural world, whilst bringing back some of the wonder and joy of which we have been stripping ourselves. Green Tea wants to know, what was the dinosaur of Clever Girl in Jurassic Park? Good question. The life roll says, what's the allegory? Velociraptor answers T Plateau. Oh, who was that? Ben Lamb with Romulus and Remus in the Iron Throne. That I gotta see close up. Velociraptor confirms Eldergrown. Thank you, Elder. I'm mostly interested in the throne. We'll get a close-up look at the wolves first. And the throne itself, composed of swords? Yeah, composed of, supposedly, a mass of swords welded, I guess welded together? Or some process? I guess welded. There's no weld marks. That's one crazy chair, says Green Tea. All right. The time is 37 past the hour, and time for our first suggestion, and that is from T Plateau. Elder believes that might be resin. A 3D printed, says Jordan Cogburn. Welcome, Jordan. By the way, coming up this Wednesday on the Gotcha Man hosted movie, we have The Wicker Man and Monster in a Box. In reviews from IMDb, The Wicker Man follows the story of Sergeant Howie, who travels to the Scottish island of Summerisle to investigate the disappearance of a young girl. However, the entire population of the island, including the girl's own supposed mother, denies that such a girl ever existed. And as the righteous Howie investigates, he learns the terrifying truth of Summerisle. Perhaps the #1 occult thriller ever made, followed by Monster in a Box, in which Spalding Gray can make the English language jump through hoops like no other. He recounts a number of events, tied together by his adversary, the monster in the box. Some parts are sad, some uproariously funny, all performed in his characteristic, sarcastic manner. You will love this one. It's a real masterpiece. Yeah, T Plateau points out, this is the real Wicker Man, not the fake Nick Cage garbage one. Takahamo Plateau. Sir Ledoux says hello. Welcome, Sir Ledoux. I just learned that there's places you can find we can send off to get 3D prints. I want to get a 3D print. I have a 3D file for Eskimo glasses, which I ordered I bought the Eskimo glasses, but they were made of such a weak plastic that they broke instantly when I just tried to flex them slightly, tried to flex the plastic slightly, just fell apart, basically in my hands. But after that, I found the the 3D file, and I'm going to try to figure out a substance, maybe nylon, that'll be the most resilient. Nylon, probably, right? Probably nylon. And I'm going to contract it to have it 3D printed. Hopefully it doesn't cost too much. Mike Mott is here. Welcome, Mike Mott. And thank you, sir. Gotcha Man says, Bill, you're supposed to make those out of birch bark. And at 40 minutes past the hour, we have a suggestion from T Plateau. And that is the 1927 Phantom Sniper of Camden, New Jersey. How about from old Camden history? They have some skin in the game, so one might think they have a better article there. Use ABS, suggests Mike Mott. Thank you, Mike Mott. ABS, really, over nylon. I don't know if they do nylon. I'm writing that down. Thank you, Michael. Much appreciated. Does anyone else have a 3D printing recommendation for that? Jordan, how about you? Big L1 is here. Welcome, Big L1. Here at dvrbs.camdenhistory.com is a story entitled The Ghost Sniper. Thank you, Allegory, for the super chat. Allegory with a fist bump. Thank you. What's the Allegory Morning Glory? Much appreciated. Here is another one of those forgotten stories that were front page news back in the day. The Ghost Sniper. Camden, 1927 and 1928. I thought that this tale, in the light of the Camden involvement of the unalivers Muhammad and Malvo, was worth their telling. I've just discovered the story and will be adding to it as I go through the microfilm newspapers of the era. Signed, Phil Cohen. Evidently the author, Phil Cohen. From the Camden Courier-Post, January 25th, 1928. Ghost sniper shoots at bus, fells cop at Bridge Plaza. Blue marble found after shot knocks officer down at 4 a.m. Windshield of bus strangely shattered. 4 private cars have also been targets. Probers are baffled. Probing a mystery that sounds more like fantastic fiction than serious fact. Police of Camden and officials of the Camden Bridge today were conducting a vigorous hunt for a phantom sniper. After 4 vehicles had been fired upon during the last month on or near Federal Street Bridge across Crescent Boulevard, a mysterious bullet or other missile penetrated the windshield of a Pennsylvania bus on the Camden Bridge and spurred authorities into action. Then at 4:30 o'clock this morning, Bridge policeman John J. Rogers was twice fired upon on the span. The second time he was struck between the shoulders, spun around and knocked down. Ouch. That's gotta hurt. Blue marble found. The missile that struck him, found a few moments later, was a blue marble. It furnished the first clue to the phantom sniper that police have obtained. Apparently it was fired from a powerful slingshot or an air gun, so powerful in fact that it struck Rogers with almost bullet-like force, although it must have been fired from a distance of nearly 100 yards. I guess they didn't find any gunpowder residue. They would have looked for gunpowder residue, one would think, even though it was, 27. You would think they would have looked for the residue. Police were unanimous in the opinion that the missile which penetrated the window of the bus on the span yesterday was no such marble but a bullet. They added, however, that there was a possibility it might have been a steel ball. I guess they didn't test it for I guess they didn't. Might have been a steel ball bearing discharged from an air gun or slingshot, such as that which is used in sniping upon Rogers. Elder says firing a marble from a gunpowder weapon would surely have shattered the marble. Thank you, Elder. Rhino Rex says, how far away would you find gunpowder on a gunshot victim? I mean gunpowder on the round. Rhino Rex. I guess you'd have to be pretty close to find gunpowder on the victim. But the person who fires it is going to have the residue on them, supposedly. Every time. Thank you, M. Tashunka B. M. Tashunka B with a super chat. And the green heart. Thank you, M. Tashunka. Much appreciated. I love you, man or gal. I love you, man. It was learned from an official source. This afternoon, the Bridge Police will question a 15-year-old boy. It is said that he lives 150 feet away from the spot where the gun was fired upon yesterday. He lives 150 feet away from the spot where the gun was fired upon yesterday. The boy and his father are said to occupy the third floor of a rooming house. So in other words, could have been a lot of other people in that rooming house, right? Oh, geez, I forgot. Sorry, T-Plateau. I got the stuff here. I'll use the stuff. Wow. This stuff's great. Makes you wake up. Elder says it sounds like something an ignorant kid would think is funny. I think the kid's got to have more problems than just being ignorant. You got to be kind of psychopathic, I think, to do stuff like that. Fire projectiles, at human targets. A kid fired at me once, and he was kind of a psychopath. Fired his BB gun at me. He was about, how far away? How would you describe it? Maybe a quarter of a football field, maybe a third of a football field away from me. He had a BB gun. I was sitting on my side porch, and he fired at me. I heard the round pass me, but he only fired one shot, thank goodness. He has since moved out. He was my next door neighbor in that direction. Frog fan says, a slingshot fired at 100 yards. Who was he, King David? That's crazy. I like that. Who was he, King David? Big Al once says, perhaps magnetic rail power. Did they have that in... Did they have the magnetic rail in 1927? Did they have the magnetic rail in 1927? No, they did not have magnetic rail systems until... Actually, this belies what they said here. They didn't have magnetic rail. No, I mean, no, comma, magnetic rail projectile weapon. No, railgun weapons didn't exist in 1927, but it says here, 1918, French inventor Louis how did you say that in French? I have no idea. Louis Octave Fachon. Oh, it's a longer name. Louis Octave Fachon Philippe files a patent for an electric gun using electromagnetic propulsion. Very early railgun idea. 1920s, some theoretical exploration, but no working prototypes. So, 1918, electric gun using electromagnetism. So, yes, could be. Green Tea says she found holes in the siding on her porch by the front door. Thank goodness she wasn't home, she says. The weird part, she continues, unless it was fired from the street, the only house with a straight shot belongs to a police officer. King Kong says, what a little brat. He could have blinded you. He needs a wallop on his fanny. Yeah, he needs more than that. He needs psychiatric help. He moved away a long time ago. More than a decade ago. He's been gone. The boy and his father are said to occupy the third floor of a rooming house on North 4th Street. Police have no evidence that this boy fired the shot or a marble that struck Rogers, but they decided to question him on ownership of a rifle or a slingshot. Meanwhile, it was revealed that still another incident in which the phantom sniper had appeared had taken place last night when a Philadelphia Pennsauken bus was fired upon near the Federal Street Bridge. Is that the same name as the other bridge? Federal Street Bridge? Let's search for the word bridge. Control F. Bridge. Camden Bridge. No, it's a different bridge. Wait. No, it was Federal Street Bridge. And where was the policeman? Hard to tell which one was which. How do I get rid of that? Delete. Thank you. There's more than one bridge involved. Not sure which is which. Meanwhile, it was revealed that... I just said that. At the same time, bridge officials disclosed that police on the span have been bothered for the past 3 months by the fact that the sniper has been shooting out electric lights. Speculation and theorizing over the peculiar incidents ran riot among the police who are investigating them today. Although the slingshot or air gun theory was given considerable credence by Rogers' extraordinary experience, other officers insisted that no instrument of this nature would discharge a bullet or a ball bearing or other metal missile with sufficient force to bore through the windshields of buses and automobiles which have been fired upon by the phantom sniper. It was November 21st that the sniper, if he is the same who has now taken the Camden Bridge as his basis of operations, first came into public notice. Former State Attorney Albert S. Woodruff was fired upon from an automobile, which his car was following across the Federal Street Bridge at the time. On that occasion, however, the report of a gun was heard by Woodruff, whereas in subsequent incidents, none of the nearby victims of the shots have heard any sound. This also strengthens the theory of the existence of air gun, or their instrument more powerful than any known to the police. If the missiles which have struck other automobiles were bullets, however, it is pointed out that they may have been fired from a rifle or revolver equipped with a silencer. They had silencers back then. Isn't that interesting? When was that developed? I guess we might find that out easiest from Wikipedia. But ChatGPT is here, so. When was the silencer invented? (1902) by Hiram Maxim, inventor of the Maxim machine gun. Patent filed in 1908. Also known as a suppressor. Elder says suppressors don't work on revolvers. Thank you, Elder. Because of the cylinder gap. Oh, interesting. And I think we're here. Yes. Since the Woodruff incident, a Riverton family has been fired upon. Another automobile windshield has been penetrated, apparently by a bullet while crossing Federal Street Bridge. And on Sunday night, Mrs. Cone of Evans Street, Haddonfield, was cut by flying glass when her car was made the target of the sniper. Rogers, the member of the Camden Bridge Police, who was struck by the blue marble early this morning, was standing on the bridge about 10 feet from the point at which the Penn Jersey bus was hit by the sniper yesterday. As he leaned over to inspect a portion of the roadway, something whistled over his head and hit the railing. He straightened up and found on the steel railing at the spot at which the missile had struck. The paint had been chipped off and the metal dented as though by a bullet. A moment later, he had turned toward the south when he was struck between the shoulders by the marble. Lost my place, sorry. With such force that the little round object hit him, that it wheeled him around as would a bullet, and felled him. As in felling a tree? Although he wore a heavy overcoat, a leather jerkin, and thick underwear, thank you for that detail, the missile left a severe bruise at the spot where it struck him. Back on his feet, Rogers saw the object which had hit him rolling away. He picked it up. It was the blue marble. There was a comment here I want to read, and that is, T. Plateau says, we had some kids destroy a new house in Perth. Parents had to pay for the damages. Thing is, these were kids from extremely wealthy families, just bored, entitled brats, no doubt. With no concept of consequences. Of course, when I was young, I didn't have any concept of consequences either, to tell you the truth. But I didn't destroy people's property. A house-to-house canvass of all dwellings in the neighborhood, from the roofs or windows of which the missile might conceivably have been discharged, was being conducted today by 4 bridge policemen. The search was begun after Joseph Costello, superintendent of the bridge, and Captain Alfred Souters head of the bridge police, had conducted a conference attended by all span officers. Yesterday's mysterious incident on the Camden Bridge occurred as the Penn Jersey bus bound for Pennsauken from Philadelphia, with 7 passengers aboard, was rolling down the incline of the bridge towards the toll booths at 3:38 o'clock. Five of the passengers were women and 2 were middle-aged men. The driver was Franklin Copeland, 29 years old. Gives his address here, gives his street address here, including the house number of the driver. The bus passed George Clark, a bridge patrolman, at a point 173 yards from the end of the incline, and perhaps 225 from the toll booths. The policeman and the bus driver are well acquainted. The driver waved, and the cop, making a megaphone of his hands, yelled, "Howdy, fats." The next instant, Copeland heard a sudden buzz, and then, if by magic, a small hole appeared in the glass before his face. Tiny bits of glass fell upon him. He yanked on the brakes. Passengers were half thrown from their seats and cried out to know what was wrong. Clark came running over. He saw the small hole at once and instantly scanned the bridge walk to find the source. There was no one in sight but a little girl who was strolling. Ah, perhaps it was the little girl. The bus went on to interview that little girl. Maybe she saw something. Person of interest. The bus went on to Pennsauken, and bridge patrolmen took up the mystery. 4 patrolled the walks, scanning the skyline on either side to see from which houses a shot might have been fired. Others searched the roadbed seeking the bullet. City police were called. The roadbed, wouldn't it be inside the bus? Gotcha Man says, she's a 20-something Romanian killer dwarf. Like an orphan. Good one, G. They found nothing, even though city police were called, and searched one house. The bus came back and a minute examination of it and the hole in the windshield began. When it was over, investigators were divided between 2 theories and completely mystified. The hole, detectives said, seemed to have been made by a steel-jacketed .22 caliber bullet. Steel-jacketed? Do they have those today? I gotta get some of them. A steel-jacketed .22? How common are steel-jacketed .22 caliber rounds? Not very common, especially compared to copper or brass-jacketed or plain lead bullets, which dominate the .22 rimfire market. From what sellers might they be available? Quite rare in the U.S. civilian market. While some retailers like Borelli and Bulk Ammo offer full metal jacket .22 ammo, these typically have copper or brass jackets, not steel. Well, good enough. If you're specifically seeking steel-jacketed, which probably are really, they may occasionally appear as military surplus or imports from Eastern Europe or Russia, but availability is inconsistent. Elder says they definitely have steel-jacketed rounds, but he has not seen 22. He's got some steel-jacketed 45 from a Russian manufacturer. Cool. For a broader search, you might consider using AmmoSeek, which aggregates listings from various retailers. However, be aware that steel-jacketed ammo remains uncommon. Is steel-jacketed ammo legal in New York State? Depends on its specific composition and intended use. Generally legal. Not outright banned in New York. However, certain types are restricted based on their construction and potential use. Armor piercing. I gotta get me some armor piercing 22 rounds. New York prohibits the possession of armor piercing. No, I don't. Gotta get that. Prohibits the possession of armor piercing ammo with the intent to use it unlawfully against another person. Use it unlawfully. In other words, in a crime. Armor piercing is defined as any ammo capable of being used in handguns. It contains a projectile core constructed entirely from materials. But these are just jackets. Isn't there lead inside, Elder? Inside those jackets? I thought there was lead inside the jacket. Or is it solid steel or solid copper or solid brass? Huh. Elder says, problem is some ranges won't allow steel-jacketed rounds. I'm not surprised. Elder says, the advantage of steel-jacketed is it performs similarly but is less expensive. Oh, it will be lighter. Yeah, it would be lighter. I thought it would be. They're still lead bullets. Oh, okay. Not much lighter. A little bit lighter. What's the advantage of a steel-jacketed round? Round. Few specific advantages. Which jacket, if any, has better penetration? Steel-jacketed have better hard surface penetration. Oh, cars, right? Disable an engine. Because steel is harder than copper. It doesn't deform as easily on impact. Copper are softer, more malleable, which is better for expansion. Ouch. And hollow points. I'm not going any further than this. Steel-jacketed wear, steel. Where is steel? Only one place. Oh, steel. No, steel, please. Going down should go up. Well, how did I skip all this at the top? Oh, it's another article. Second article. Steel-jacketed 22 caliber. Some bridge policemen said it might have been from a 25 caliber automatic, and some said 22. Copeland declared he was positive there was no automobile directly ahead of him on the bridge. No pedestrian except a little girl was in sight. According to detectives, it is out of reason that the missile was fired from a house on the south side. The glass would have splintered because of the angle from which the bullet would have entered, they declared. Crank suspected. No, a crank. About a homicidal maniac. That brought up the theory that a missile was fired from within the bus. Lieutenant Gregory Love of the Bridge Police suggested that a crank using a pistol equipped with a silencer might have fired it. Further search was made of the interior of the bus, and on the glass alongside the driver, near the partition at the back, was found a half-inch long scratch. No bullet or other missile was found. Inside of the glass wall, I wonder if it lined up with the round. Did they take a piece of string and find out? The inside of the glass was chipped and the outside smooth. Generally, a bullet will chip at the point of exit, not entrance. The inside was chipped. Bullet will chip at the point of exit. So it was fired from the outside. They admitted themselves completely bewildered. Then the driver began looking around among the cards signed by his passengers as witnesses. He was one card shy. Do you know, he said slowly, I don't think that a man gave me the card after all. I don't think that man gave me the card after all. When he found the card signed by Mrs. Harriet Billingsley, and gives her street address, including the street number, 30 East Cedar Avenue, Merchantville. He recalled that she had told him that a moment before the bus stopped, she thought she saw a flash on her right, the south side. The other women who gave their names were Eleanor, street address, Mrs. C. Schmidt, and Mrs. T. Van Newkirk, both of street address, including number again. City detectives said this afternoon they would make no further investigation of the motor bus on the Camden span. Both declared they were convinced the shot was fired from inside the bus, despite the evidence. My addition there. Detective City George Ward said, we are convinced that no sniper fired the shot that went through the windshield. We believe the shot was fired inside the bus. Wait. The inside of the glass was chipped. And where's that other statement? Is out of reason a missile was fired from a house. That's what have splintered from the... I can't find it. Let us move on. Green Tea has a link of 30 East Cedar Avenue. Thank you, Green Tea. And there's where she lived. There's a picture of the house. Could it have been the same house? There's another picture of the house. This is a... Here we go. Can we... Yeah. Their driveway being here. This tree's coming down. Yeah, it looks old. Notice these three houses, all similar construction for the porches. Same slanted roofs. Built near the same time, I imagine, right? And three different main house constructions, but the porches very similar. The style at the time, perhaps? So maybe not built at the same time. but very close in the same era. Crank suspected. Oh, here it is. Generally, detective said a bullet will chip at the point of exit, not entrance. And the chip was... the inside was chipped. Chip at the point of exit. So from outside. These police of the 20s. Glass was shattered on the inside, which shows that the bullet was fired from the inside. If the bullet had entered from the outside, the glass on the outside would have been shattered, Ward said. So maybe the story writer got his facts mixed up, and one of the other of these is wrong. Bridge Patrolman Crane, who was standing near the bus when the shot was fired, declared today that the driver of the bus asserted he heard no report of a pistol. If the pistol had been fired near his head, he naturally would have heard it, said Crane. No kidding. I think that's the end of that particular article. It is. Next up, from at 16 past the hour, David Bryce. And David wants to know about Operation Hurricane. Let's go to historicmysteries.com. Britain's desperate bid to be third. At historicmysteries.com, in a story by Robbie Mitchell, titled Operation Hurricane. That looks like an atomic explosion. It was a moment that would change the course of history, forever altering the global power dynamic and ushering in a new era of nuclear weapons. On October 3rd, 1952, a team of British scientists and military personnel conducted the first ever nuclear test by the UK. How many nuclear tests were carried out by the UK? "45. 21 atmospheric and 24 underground. Operation Hurricane being the first test at Montebello Islands, Australia. Last test was joint with the U.S. at the Nevada test site. Dragon is still on. Turn off Dragon. The operation, codenamed Operation Hurricane, was a monumental achievement in scientific innovation, but also raised ethical and environmental questions about the use and testing of these weapons. Following the events of World War II, there was a mad rush to become a nuclear power, everyone playing catch-up to the Americans. This included their longtime allies, the UK. The site of the explosion was Main Bay, just off Tremool Island, part of the Montebello Island chain of Western Australia. There are numerous types of nuclear bombs, but on this day, the UK's atomic weapon of choice tested a plutonium implosion-type weapon, similar to the kind of bomb the Americans used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this picture shows, according to the caption, Montebello Islands were just off the coast of Australia, and Operation Hurricane required Australian approval. Really? Of course. This is a public domain picture. What happens if I click that plus sign? There we go. Handy. There's Montebello Islands right there. So that's where it took place. This being Western Australia. So the people in Carnarvon, Onslow, and Port Hedland, as well as Marble Bar, Broome and Derby, and Geraldton, and possibly even Perth, even though that's behind the mountains for Geraldton and Perth. And they probably saw it, including Wyndham and Darwin. Interesting. How do I get rid of it? X. Like any major endeavor, the operation was initially plagued by setbacks. The first problem was the chosen site. The survey party chosen to choose the site made some major errors. The site was hard to get to and surrounded by rough seas, which led to major delays and safety fears. The test device was large and heavy and had to be transported over long distances, and then assembled from pieces. To get the pieces to the test site, they had to be transferred between boats in choppy conditions. Not ideal when assembling a nuclear device. The team also had to waste several hours a day just commuting between the ship they were sleeping on and the site of the test. Some days they also had to wait hours just to be picked up or dropped off. Particularly rough seas from the 10th to the 14th of August brought the project to a halt altogether. This all being said, the operation was a massive success. After one final delay, while they waited for the right weather, the bomb was detonated on the 3rd of October. The yield was estimated to be 25 kilotons, making it the largest nuclear explosion ever recorded at that time. Of course, success for the British did not come without consequences, particularly for the environment. Early nuclear testing was extremely messy, no kidding. The radioactive contamination of the Montebello Islands was devastating. It took until the 1980s for the residual radioactivity to decay to levels considered to be non-harmful, but the island remained a no-go area until 1992. So 92 from, was it 52? When was it? Line 19. How come there's only one tag? Oh, I said 18. Until 1992. Good. So we're on the last one. 52. 92. 40 years even. The team worked closely with industrial partners. Blah, blah, blah. Design of the weapon. This method used conventional explosives to compress a plutonium core until it achieved critical mass. How did they get the parties to work together? Necessity and desperation. Change the global power dynamic. Ooh. Wonder if we can read this. Britain tests her first atomic bomb off Western Australia coast. Printed in the West Australian. New tab, please. With a something the flat, with a lightning like flash. Britain's first atomic weapon was exploded at 1 a.m. in the Montebello Islands, off the looks like northwest of Western Australia. Was followed by a huge expanding cloud. Really hard to read here, unfortunately. No ground shock felt. A faint wisp of cloud. Task for the RAAF, Royal Something Air Force. A poor man's bomb to Harwell men. News traveled faster than shockwave. It led to a new global arms race and arms control dynamic. It drove the Soviets to test more and more bombs of increasing sizes. On the other hand, the U.S. had a long history of refusing to share its weapon advancements with the British, or downright stealing British technology and then claiming it for their own. While the two remained close allies, there were various fallings out over such issues. The creation of a third nuclear power also encouraged other countries to seek their own nuclear weapons. Let's end there. T. Plateau says, I'm sure Father knew some bloke involved in that operation. Cool. Next up from Verpine. Who suggests the topic? Phone calls from the deceased. Very nice, Verpine. Thank you. Turn off the dragon. Let's take the first one, live about. True stories of phantom phone calls. Excuse me. Need juice. Elder, Royal Australian Air Force. Thank you, Elder. Royal Australian. Phantom Phone Calls 3. True stories that will make you think twice before answering the phone. By Stephen Wagner. Can the dead manipulate electronic devices? Can they reach back through the fabric of time and space and influence the workings of our communications devices, our phones, to leave one last message, to say one last goodbye? As fantastic as it seems, the mystery of phone calls from the dead is not uncommon. These calls usually occur within the first 24 hours after the death. But there have been cases in which the calls were received as long as 2 years after. The call was usually filled with heavy static, and the phantom caller's voice faint as if far away. Far away indeed, says the author. This happened to my older brother Matt about a year ago, just a few weeks after my eldest brother Jeremy's best friend Joe expired of heart trouble. Matt received a telephone call from a person that sounded exactly like Joe. He said something like, "Matt, it's Joe. Is Jeremy home? Something really strange is going on." Matt freaked out. I'm freaking out myself, and could hardly answer. No, he's not. Sorry. Then the caller hung up and Matt looked at the caller ID. It read out of area. Indeed. So Matt tried *69, but they were unable to trace the call. We never got another telephone call from Joe. It still scares Matt to think of it. This from Janae S. Another story. My husband lost his grandfather a long time ago. But just recently he has been experiencing something really weird. He has seen his grandfather's name on our caller ID. So we thought someone was calling from his grandfather's house. That was the first time, and no one was even home. Just today, for the second time, he was at work, and clearly, along with co-workers, heard the phone ring. After answering it on the first ring, he only heard a dial tone. When he looked at the phone's directory, which has no caller ID but lists who has called, he saw the grandfather's name again. This from Leroy L. The next one from Mary B. One of my clients related this story to me a few years ago. At the time, she worked for the Department of Social Services. And one of the services she offered was checking for emergency expenses. She had a check issued for $100 to one of her clients for utilities and was about to close the file when her phone rang. On the line was the woman to whom the check was issued. The woman sounded vague and distracted, but clearly said, "I won't be needing that $100 after all." My client made a note of it and went on with her work. That evening at home, she was reading the newspaper when she saw the obit of the woman with which she had talked on the phone. She had expired the previous day. This next from Bonnie Q. 3 years ago, my mother passed away. We were very close and I miss her daily. Last Christmas evening, I went to bed and woke up to the phone ringing. After answering, a voice that was very familiar to me said, "Hello there." It was my mother's voice. The line had static and the sound cut in and out. I said, "This can't be you, Mom. You're unalive." She said, "Oh, come on now," and sounded a bit agitated. And then we were cut off. Green Tea says, Green Tea is talking about a personal experience. And let's see who passed away. A beautiful and crazy story about a phone call. I was with my father as he laid unaliving. Over the previous days, as he laid in a coma, I would read to him, and often I would tell him, "Dad, you got to let me know you're okay when you cross over." When he passed, I was there along with my mother and a preacher. Suddenly the phone rang. I answered. It was static, so I hung up. It rang again. The preacher at this point was in awe. I looked up and just said, "It's Dad." I looked up and just said, "It's Dad. He made it." It was static again. The preacher just said, "This is a spiritual moment." My 16, and I'm back to the article from Bonnie Q. My 16-year-old daughter was sleeping in the next room and also heard the phone ring that night. I know it was my mother's voice. She has a Norwegian accent. It was her. This next from Vicky H. About 3 nights ago, my husband got a phone call at 1:57 a.m. It was a very stormy night. The phone was giving him little bleeps, but nobody would say anything. Then the phone went dead. I was asleep, then the phone went unalive. I was asleep by the phone, but I never heard it ring. And I always hear the phone ring. Only he heard it. He called the number back on the caller ID, and it said, "This number not in service." The number is still on our caller ID. The same night at 4 a.m., his mother, who lives about an hour away, also got a phone call. Her son was asleep in the house, also never heard the phone ring. She heard the same bleeps, and it was the same caller ID. She called it back, and it was also a not-in-service number. About 5 a.m., his mother was lying in her bed and saw a man standing at the foot of her bed looking at her. She said he was tall and thin and had dark eyes and dark clothes. He stared at her for a minute, then had darted across the room and disappeared. We are very freaked out about this and cannot figure out why this happened all on the same night. And nothing like this has ever happened before, no kidding. Why did I not hear the phone ring and my husband did when the phone is right near our bed? My husband lost his brother about 6 months ago, and it was tragic. This is getting very sad. And also very freaky. Thank you for being. And at 37 past the hour, a request from Green Tea. And Green Tea says they checked her phone later. It was fine. Even if it was the hospital staff doing something weird, but I don't know how because no one came in or out when he was passing. Somehow it made me feel like he was okay and would still be out there watching over me. Thank you, Green Tea, for sharing your personal experience. Kanga Kong requests more. This from Crystal S. I just found out that one of my phone calls the other day was an unalive lady. I was at my mother's house and I was calling a friend who lived nearby. She was at her cousin's house. So I looked up the number in the phone book. It only said Owens in the phone book, so I knew it was my friend's cousin's number. I called it and it didn't even ring, but an old lady answered. She said, "Hello." I asked, "Is Amelia there?" Amelia is my friend. The old lady said, "No, dear, Amelia isn't here, sweetie. I should be expecting her any minute now." So I thought nothing of it and hung up. I thought they left for a bit. I knew Amelia lived with her mom at her grandparents' house. What I didn't know is what I found out when I talked to Jessica. She said, Amelia's grandmother is unalive. And we were there all day long. We were sitting right by the phone. It never rang all day. Then we have a tale from Claire E. I was staying at a college in North Wales in 1997. The cottage was owned by my best friend's grandfather and was in a fairly isolated location, but still on tracks which lead to the main road. It was very basic, but had electricity and a boiler for hot water, although no central heating. It was a 3 double-bedroom property with no outhouses. There were 6 of us staying in this cottage one Easter weekend, and we spent much of our time lazing around. We decided one Saturday morning to go out to the local market, calling off for a pub lunch on the way back. I was sitting at the pub eating our meal. Other friends of ours who were staying in a nearby town entered the pub and sat at our tables, saying they were glad we were still here. When asked how on earth they knew we were here, they said they had phoned the cottage where we were staying, and the lady who answered the phone told them. There was no one else staying at the cottage. No cleaner or any other person tied to the cottage. I spent the remainder of our time there sleeping with the hall lights on. And I've never returned. This one's called The Long, Long Distance Plan, and it's from... And it's long, and it's the last one. By Mary B. I have never been a believer in spirits, but after what happened to me, I can't help but reconsider my position. I'm a telephone sales rep, and at the time of this occurrence, I was marketing a phone service. This happened to me at work. On Thursday, April the 26th, I made a sales call to Pennsylvania. It started like any other call. Yes, I need to speak to Mr. or Mrs. B. The woman identified herself as Mrs. B, and I continued on with my sales call. She seemed interested and asked a lot of questions, but when I came to the decision-making part, she quickly stopped me, insisting she had to talk to her husband. Her objections were the same every time I attempted to close. ABC, always be closing. She explained she had tried to get him to change phone carriers before, but in her words, he was married to AT&T. She also pointed out that since his retirement, he spent a great deal of time fishing and was not easy to get in touch with, and it would be best to try early in the morning before he left for his favorite hobby. She also indicated their long-distance bills were getting out of hand because he made lengthy calls to North Carolina and felt the plan would be beneficial to them. On that note, I decided that perhaps this was worth a callback and told her I would call her husband the next day. The next day I made that call, and I'll never forget it. On the callback, the husband did answer the phone. I introduced myself in the normal fashion and explained I had been talking to his wife the previous day, and she had suggested I speak to him. You can imagine his shock and horror when he distraughtly stated to me, "Lady, I don't know who you were talking to, but my wife unalived, and I am not in any mood to speak to anyone." With that, he quickly hung up the phone. These are some solid-ass stories. Incredible. Next up, at 43 past the hour. From Green Tea. How appropriate. To wit. Well, I got to go back one, I forgot. Or else we'll multiply or add that to our responses. Strange things found in Queen Victoria's coffin. Grunge is pretty good. We've done grunge quite a few times in the past, so have we done rancor. ConnectingDirectors.com. I like that title. Morbidly creepy. Let's do that one. The morbidly creepy and straight-up weird contents of Queen Victoria's coffin. The Victorian Age, named after this queen. Originally posted on Rancor. Queen Victoria, despite the fact that she was quite tiny, looms large over most of the 19th century. She was every bit a woman of her time, engaging in the overblown sentimentality and culture of unaliving so pervasive during the age that bears her name. When she unalived at 81, she left secret, detailed instructions on how to handle her body and what items to place in her coffin. Victorians had something of an obsession with death and death rituals. And the Egyptians. They had an obsession with the Egyptians as well. One reason for this had to do with the fact that people of the era literally lived much closer to unalivement than most people do today. No kidding. For example, aspects of the Industrial Revolution shortened life expectancy, even in an age when 40 was considered old. Bodies were cleaned and prepared for burial by family members, and the corpses were put in the parlor for viewing. Unalivement and all that came with it hovered far more closely to the living than it does today. Friends and loved ones created jewelry made from the hair of the deceased. Furniture and doorways were draped in black crepe, and photos were taken of the unalived, dressed and seated in chairs with other family members, as though still alive. Or families would gather for photos, all dressed in black, around a portrait of the dearly departed, sorrowful looks on every face. At the time of her death, the Queen was Britain's longest reigning monarch. She'd lived a life full of responsibilities, loves, and intrigues. Her 9 children were often in vehement opposition to some of the ways Victoria lived her life, and resentful of those with whom she was closest. So when it came time for the Queen to make her final arrangements, she knew her wishes would require an element of secrecy in order that they be observed. Chief among those carefully kept secrets were the weird things she wanted to be buried with which she wanted to be buried. T. Plateau says probably because more people died at home back then. Photography was in its infancy as well, and so it was rare to have many pictures of the deceased. T. Plateau's granddad's uncle was a memento mori photographer in Victorian Edwardian England. However, for a long time, going back to the article, very few people were aware that Victoria's secret instructions had survived. At the end of her life, Victoria summoned her secretary, also her chief lady-in-waiting, and dictated 12 pages of specific instructions regarding her funeral and burial. The instructions were delivered to the Queen's personal physician, and a descendant wrote a book on the famous monarch. Where are the items? One of the first strange items on Victoria's list was a plaster cast of Prince Albert's hand, made shortly after his unalivement. When Albert unalived unexpectedly at age 42, Victoria was devastated. She embarked on her own personal cult of death and worship of her departed husband. But there was more. Read more on Rancor. She slept nightly with the plaster cast of his hand. I guess we have to go to Rancor. Read more on Rancor. In the story originally written by Cheryl Adams Rickoff. Same title. Okay, so we're looking for, what did I do? Did I go? Yeah, I did. Okay, so we're looking for Nightly with the Plaster Cast. We'll find that here. That can't be a death picture, can it? I don't think so. I'm sure they would have had tons of photographers available for taking their pictures. A totally white funeral, complete with a wedding veil. And a macabre, twisted mixture of death and youth culture. She insisted she be buried wearing the white bridal veil from her 1840 wedding to Prince Albert. She wanted wedding rings on both hands representing her husband and her lover. Well, in my case, it's the same person. Here, the instructions became a little complex. While her family knew she has to be buried wearing her wedding ring, only the Queen's secretary and physician knew she wanted to be buried wearing a second wedding ring on her left ring finger. This ring was given to her by a man other than her husband, a man she came to know very well during the 40 years she lived after Albert's unalivement. T. Plateau confirming that's an alive photo. Thank you, T. Plateau. The man's name was John Brown, who was extremely controversial, particularly within the British royal family. She had sent for him during the early years of her widowhood, since she remembered that Prince Albert had spoken very highly of him. The Queen and the groom became close friends. He was the only person in Victoria's orbit who could get away with criticizing her and speaking to her in a familiar tone. For more than a century, historians puzzled over the strange relationship between the monarch and the servant. In recent years, historians have taken a much more human approach. She required charcoal and as much jewelry as possible. Was Queen Victoria a pack rat? The answer is yes. Her coffin, custom designed and enormous for such a small person, was nearly filled to the brim before her body was placed inside. Before anything else, a layer of charcoal was placed inside at the bottom. This was standard procedure during the days before modern embalming, designed to keep down odors and wetness emanating from the deceased. Spread over this was one of Prince Albert's dressing gowns. What is a dressing gown? That's going to be here. From Wikipedia. Or a housecoat or a morning gown is a robe, a loose-fitting outer garment worn by either men or women, similar to a bathrobe but without the absorbent material. A loose, open-fronted gown closed with a fabric belt that is put on over nightwear on rising from bed, or less commonly, today, worn over some day clothes when partially dressed or undressed in the morning or evening. Typically worn around the house. They may be worn for warmth, over nightwear when not in bed, or as a form of lingerie. A dressing gown may be worn over nightwear or other clothing, or with nothing underneath. When guests or other visitors enter the household while the hosts are partially dressed or undressed, dressing gown may be used for modesty. And I lost our original article. There it is. Okay, now I got it. Also, the coffin was filled with sentimental mementos from loved ones and friends. These varied from shawls to books, bracelets to lockets, and photos to fresh flowers. Even Victoria herself was adorned with rings on every finger, bracelets on both wrists, lockets and pendants. One hand on Albert's plaster hand, the other clutching John Brown's photo, and a lock of his hair. The crowning touch was the delicate white bridal veil. That can't be it. Is that it? No. A sprig of Scottish heather was hidden beneath other flowers. She was buried in a sea of sentimental souvenirs and a variety of flowers. Although she died in January of 1901, her family were able to source floral bouquets and arrangements from greenhouses across the UK and other parts of Europe. Her daughter-in-law, for example, brought fresh hyacinths before it was sealed. Perhaps chief among the floral grave offerings, the Queen asked that a sprig of heather be placed on her body. The flowering heather is a Scottish symbol, and perhaps served as a remembrance of happy times with her family at Castle Balmoral, as well as of the adventurous, exciting time she shared with servant and companion John Brown. Yeah, she was hot. Perhaps one of the most touching items placed in the coffin was a heavy, ornately embroidered man's cloak, which belonged to Prince Albert. It was sewn and embroidered by the couple's daughter, Princess Alice, and worn by her father with pride. Balmoral, says T. Plateau. Thank you, T. Plateau. Balmoral. Castle Balmoral. Two Feathers, welcome, ma'am. Two Feathers says, I doubt all those rings are still in her fingers. Pray tell, Two Feathers. Her request for an effigy went unfollowed for unfortunate reasons. She ordered a life-size sculpture of Albert in repose, life-sized, which was placed atop his sarcophagus. I guess you can see, obviously, why they couldn't fit it in the coffin. Everyone had forgotten where her grave statue was stored. That's why it wasn't included. Life-size. Life-size sculpture of Albert in repose, his head inclining toward a sculpture of his wife, which was placed atop his sarcophagus. And they couldn't find it. Huh. Her most important demand involved the keeper of her secrets. Oh, last part. Sir James Reed served as Queen Victoria's primary physician for the last 15 years of her life. He was devoted to her and she to him, trusting no one in her family with her final wishes. It was only natural for her to turn to him as the keeper of her life's secrets. The detailed instructions prepared by the Queen's secretary still exist. They are held in the possession of his descendants as part of his collection of personal papers. And the royal family is not happy about this. The late Princess Margaret reportedly confronted members of the Reed family in public, accusing them of, quote, having something that belongs to us. Give it back, end quote. Royal demands were to no avail, and the list remains in the Reed archive. Thank you, Green Tea. And thank you to all the other contributors. T. Plateau, David Bryce, and Verpine. And don't forget, coming up this Wednesday, The Wicker Man and Monster in a Box. The Wicker Man from Anthony Schaefer, the writer of Frenzy, the writer of Sleuth. Comes this incredible occult thriller, in which a Puritan police sergeant searches an island for a missing girl, while the pagan locals claim she is unknown to them. Followed by Monster in a Box. This is the story of Spalding Gray and his attempt to dominate the monster in a box. It is his first-person account about dealing with success while striving to be successful again. Until then, and I'll see you there, may God bless and protect you all.